And making sure everyone's got audio and everything's okay. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Sweet. Thank you, Emmanuel. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Josiah. Well, welcome to our next installment of the OCCDLA AI discussion series. I'll do some introductions here in a second, but while I do that, Google decided to log me out, so I'm going to log back in while I talk. Um, if you can all just use the chat and just introduce yourself, your name, your role at your institution, and what institution you call primarily home, or maybe there's multiple institutions if you're an adjunct or part-time faculty member. I'm just trying to get a sense of who's in the room and who's joining us today. So my name is Kevin Steves. I'm an instructional designer with Lane Community College. And these discussions have been brought to you through OCCDLA, which is the Oregon Community College Distance Learning Association Professional Development Planning Group. But I'm going to call some people out here in a second. If they're here, please go ahead and open up your camera and wave. But Greg Kaminsky has been a central piece from PCC. Sarah Miller, who I saw here from Tillamook Bay Community College. Beth Hale, who I'm not sure if she is here, but she is from Chemeketa, and then Jess Winus from Lynn Benton. So thank you to those group of people for help coordinating and bringing these AI discussion series to us through the last couple of months. We've began discussing and focusing on AI and teaching and learning in the fall of 23, so just this last few months ago. Feels like a year ago, but it wasn't, in November, where we started at the discussion of painting a AI picture in education with Rory Beck and myself from Lane Community College. We facilitated that discussion. In January, we continued in the winter term with AI syllabus policies, and Johnny Zackel from PCC guided us through that discussion. February, we talked about using AI with your students. That was Jess Winus and Paul Montone that helped us with that one. And then today, in March, we're going to be talking about assessment in the AI era. And I'll give a formal introduction here in a second, but Dr. Rand Ware from Lynn Benton, Lane Community College, and myself will kind of guide us through that. If you are interested in the previous discussions, the resources, the recordings that we created, I pasted the link to that Google Doc in the chat. You can have access to that. And then from today, we'll make sure to post our slides and the recording from today's discussion as well in that resource. So keep that handy. There's still time if you're interested in a spring term and continuing AI discussions in spring. At the bottom of that document, there's a Google form. They'll ask you what topics you're interested in an open discussion piece too, if you have some other things that aren't on that list. The committee is actually going to meet following this meeting to help identify what are next steps for April's discussion. So that leads me to today of assessment in the era of AI. For me, this has been one of the most anticipated sessions. I know there's a lot of interest around the elephant in the room, should we say. And AI has raised to the surface many critical questions in education, many of which we seem to be a deeper extension of the questions we began to ask in 2020. Generative AI has turned education, and specifically, I think, higher education, on its side, and in some cases upside down, and did some shakes to get everything kind of out of there. Many faculty are forced to reckon with their assessments, or are their assessments measuring student learning, or are we measuring how well our students use AI? How do we communicate and sell the love of learning and the value of integrity to our students? Those are difficult questions to ask, and it leads us to very vulnerable positions in identifying needs and then seeking help in collaboration and finding solutions. So we hope today's discussion is a step forward in giving us a deeper understanding of AI and then potential first steps in identifying some solutions. So I want to stop talking as much and introduce Dr. Rand Ware, Assessment Coordinator at Lane Community College, who with myself will help to facilitate this discussion, which will continue with the same format we've done in the past, where we'll have about 20 to 30 minutes of kind of open main group discussion, followed by smaller breakout groups for smaller individual discussions, and then we'll share out as a group at the end. So without that, I think I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Rand, if you want to introduce yourself and kind of get us started.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. Hello, everyone. I am Rand. I am the Faculty Assessment Coordinator at Lane Community College, as mentioned. I am non-instructional faculty, so I'm in a faculty role, but I haven't been teaching. So being outside the classroom, I have an interesting perspective on this topic, I think, and especially because I'm trying to get back into the classroom as soon as possible, at least on a part-time basis. So my background in teaching is in the field of psychology. I spent about 17 years teaching psychology, predominantly two-year institutions. And as an associate of Kevin, I find myself increasingly likely to be navigating this conversation in which I feel a little bit like I'm Willy Wonka from the 1971 version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory in the boat scene, where we're not sure which way this is going, and it's both exciting and horrifying at the same time. So, so this isn't designed to be a presentation from me or from Kevin. It's designed to be a conversation about concerns or issues or opportunities that we might see in this when it comes to assessment, because I don't have the silver bullet or the magic bullet or whatever kind of bullets you're looking for to fix this as an issue. But I think it is an important conversation, and it's a conversation that's moving into adapting to rather than resisting. Which is exciting. I think the conversation around AI and assessment is generally focused on issues of academic dishonesty, which leans into grading and whether grading is being done appropriately given issues with that possibility of dishonesty. I think the discussion is starting to turn in some of these kinds of environments toward a focus on something else. So folks are saying, how do I know that my students have learned, in spite of AI? And I think that the conversation is shifting, or should maybe shift toward, how can I ensure that they will learn despite the use of AI? Like what can we do knowing that AI is a tool in our world today to ensure that students will still achieve those learning outcomes despite the use of the generative AI and the large language models. And I think that there are some wonderful conversations to be had around how to adapt that. But then we need to take a step back and consider, what does that do to other students? Are we disadvantaging some students in our colleges by leveraging AI or by ratcheting up our assessment tools in order to meet the challenge of artificial intelligence? The fact that faculty today live in a world where we have concerns that the students in our classrooms are using artificial intelligence to complete their assignments, while also being concerned that students don't know how to attach a PDF in their LMS, feels spread very thin for some people to meet the technological demands of their students and of their classroom. And so in trying to navigate how to deal with AI, and in hearing some of the things that were said in the last session by Jess and Paul, maybe we also need to turn this conversation about assessment with AI into a discussion of how we might leverage it as a tool for ourselves in teaching to ease the faculty load and provide more opportunity for the kinds of assessments that we'll be discussing as we move, through this session. Or at least I hope that you'll be discussing as we move through this session. We do have some Slido slides. Kevin, are we going to move into the slides here? I think we decided to open this with a general discussion that might help orient some of the small group. So we're going to go ahead and have you log into a Slido thing here, either on your phone using the QR code or going to slido.com and putting the numbers in there so you can join and answer some of the questions that we have, in order to stimulate some larger group discussion here that might help us have some things to talk about in those breakout groups, assuming we get there.
So first question is, what are the top challenges in your courses? Top AI challenges in your courses? And if we do this right, yep, it'll start to build a word cloud. So please go ahead and enter your thoughts there. And you can do multiple thoughts if you want, multiple entries. But try and just kind of interested in seeing what the temperature of the room is. So as a group, kind of, where are we seeing? And I can't say so far I'm surprised on the result. So plagiarism, equity, Equity, to me is a growing concern. I feel that, like Rand was saying, are we in some ways kind of developing a system of the AI haves and the AI have-nots? There's access is a concern. There's a barrier. Just access to connectivity, to tools, to access AI, not alone just access to AI itself. So that's a big concern I have with me. Ethics is a massive one. How do we instill values into our students to ethically use AI in appropriate ways, so that they can understand the ethics behind it, the bias and the misinformation? Where is copyright being kind of pulled into AI and being used? How is it appropriate to use in one course, but maybe inappropriate to use in the same way in another course? And understanding and navigating those differences just in how they progress through their educational careers. Critical thinking. If you use AI as a crutch and you copy and you paste, there's no thought whatsoever in that, right? So how do we instill values of our students of integrity, and value of learning, but then also how to really kind of critically think around everything that's being presented to us and thrown at us? How do we understand what's real and what's not real, kind of going forward in some of these AI things? So yeah, these are really great responses. Keep adding to it. There's still people typing, so I'll wait here for a second. But ethics, critical thinking, plagiarism, equity, knowledge, that's a good one. Knowledge is there a difference between knowledge and information? Before, I think we had access to information. AI maybe gives us access to knowledge in a different way now. So these are great responses. If anyone wants to, we want this to really be a conversation. I know there's a lot of people here, but if you feel comfortable unmuting and raising your hand, feel free to speak up to your thoughts as well. All right, should we go on to the next one, Rand? Did we get what we wanted from this?
Sure, yeah. As long as everybody's had an opportunity there to see the word cloud, I appreciate seeing learning outcomes popping up in a few of those different places. It reminds me, Kevin, I was trying to remember what website you sent me a month ago where I saw the words, are we assessing, is this assessment of learning or is it assessment for learning?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a lot of what we see happening here. Skynet, thank you for that.
Yeah, this is great. All right. Oh, one more person's typing, so man, two more people. This is getting a lot of traction. This is really great. Let's see what one more person has to say. Authenticity and critical thinking. Yeah, those are great. Okay. Our next question is, how will or how does AI have an impact on how we teach? So how we teach. And this is going to be an open dialogue. So it'll just kind of pop up the words as you enter them. No word clouds on this one. So how does AI have an impact on how we teach? I think this probably depends on what side of the fence you fall on. So we'll see. This will be interesting. Link to use in industry. Absolutely. How does industry and workforce adapt? How is it adapting? How is it changing to AI? And how does that eventually inform our curriculum and course outcomes? Brainstorm ideas, quicker feedback for students, formative assessments, invent new assignments, like that one, ideas for quiz questions, find myself questioning how to assign things so students will learn the materials. Talk about it in a visible way, absolutely. So I'm trying to keep up with these. They're coming in quick. This is great. Integration into tasks. Outcome-specific learning activities. It's a good one. Re-envision instructional design. Absolutely. That is something that I have been trying to do myself, is how can I leverage this tool for my profession, and doing that work. Offer assignments that are grounded in student experiences or interviews, fewer summaries, for example. Make space for learning to happen for students with broad range of digital literacy and access. That's a really important point. And Rand, you touch on that as we were starting up. If you have a student that doesn't even quite understand how to upload a PDF to your LMS for an assignment, how do you get them to a level where they can leverage AI in a way that helps them and assist them in their learning versus being a crutch for them? So those are really important things for us to discuss. gamification, inclusive learning, critical thinking, and prompt writing. I will tell you, it is all about how we ask questions. It's all about the prompts and how we craft and design our prompts. That is the key to whether AI being a good tool for us or whether AI being mediocre. Rand, it looked like you had something there on that one.
I saw the longer syllabus comments. You know, it does feel a bit more like you have to frame that. It's a big discussion on our campus, and I think in a lot of these spaces, how do we change the syllabus? What kinds of policies do we need to have on our syllabi, or the academic integrity policies, or whatever else? Like, how do we frame that language now in order to cover the broad range of representing work as your own that is not your own?
Yeah.
And it does, you know, the make standard quizzing obsolete. I mentioned in my introduction there that I'm looking forward to being back in the classroom. I'm trying to get myself a class for next year so that I can keep one toe in the classroom. And I think, you know, thinking back to how I structured some of my assignments 3 to 4 years ago really makes me think about how some of what I used to do, I can't do it anymore. And I'm going to have to redesign my course.
Yeah. Or, a lot of what I've had conversations with the faculty is that those assessments are still valuable and still good. But maybe now instead of them being the final product, maybe they're just a first step in that scaffolding of assessment that you're trying to achieve. I like the comment in here, and I think I can, yeah. This one here, it's not like you will be carrying a calculator in your pocket. Now here we are with cell phones. There's calculators in all of our pockets, and technically AI is in our pocket as well. And that's just now. What will it be like in 10 years or 5 years or next year, let alone 20 or 30 years from now? So those are really interesting questions.
I spent a little time trying to think last night and this morning about what's the difference between this and a calculator, like mentally, cognitively speaking. And, you know, if I use a calculator, I still need to know what to put into it. And so is that prompting then? Is it about what to put into it? And how does that change things? Are we moving from the information age into a different era of learning and education as a result of needing to know more how to ask the right questions than how to produce, strictly the right answer?
Tammy Steves, great last name, by the way. I read a paper this morning that 95% of high school students are now carrying around a smartphone. So it's in every pocket. All right, I think we're going on to the next one. Next question. This is the big one, right? This is kind of why we're all here at this session, at least. How do we adapt our assessment tools in response to generative AI?
I think we saw a few people answering this question already as they were scrolling by on the last slide. I was thinking, oh, that's jumping ahead because that was the question here. And I love that because it shows how much our assessment tools are integrated with our concept of teaching and orienting towards students toward this developmental approach of completing an activity and learning through that activity. So
I love anonymous. They're all anonymous, but let's all chat GPT. That's what I would do. And I'm no shames in how much I use AI, but putting my course outcome in AI or chat GPT and then asking it for ideas of how could I build authentic, formative type assessments around that outcome and seeing what ideas it comes up with. I think that's a great suggestion.
Asking the question, the purpose of your academic program, and what are we preparing students for? And Kevin, to your point a little bit earlier, how is it going to change course and curriculum, course and program learning outcomes if we're looking at this? And to the point somebody made in the slide earlier, what's this connection then with industry, and what will industry expect students to be able to do with AI or without it? Where will this lean into productivity? And if it increases productivity, what then does it leave us time for? Could this be a humanizing technology in the sense of providing us more time to do the collaboration because it's less time fiddling with the files?
Authentic assessments. I saw that a couple of times, asking AI for ideas on how to build authentic assessments. Use AI to invent quiz questions. So that's another great way too, is to create parallel quiz questions or parallel exams. So if you have an exam already, can AI create 3 or 4 versions of that exact same exam for you? Not that I want to promote multiple choice questions or anything, but I think at certain times those are absolutely appropriate to have. Um, yeah. So lots of great suggestions, a lot of them on using AI to actually help find the answers, which I think is really important for us to recognize and how we could leverage AI to help us in this. 3 more people are typing, so I hate always leaving the slide while people are participating. Performance assessments, assess thinking. Yeah. Thank
Well
you for
done.
the example and demonstration. That's awesome. Okay, one more person typing. We'll see what they say. Okay. Thank you all for that participation. That it really helps a lot to, I think, see other perspectives on, for one of the purposes of these sessions is to get us in a room or in a virtual room, I guess, to hear from colleagues from outside of our institution. I think it builds perspective and really helps know that we're not on 17 individual islands. We're actually a part of a greater common question that we all have. So this is very valuable, I think, in kind of giving that perspective for everyone. So I appreciate your participation. Okay. Yes, we will. I will somehow figure out a way to share the information that came through the Slido pieces. I think I have access to all that. I can probably dump into that Word doc that we have going. Okay, so then that leads us to one of the taglines of our session was Bloom's Revisited. This is a really great resource, and we'll make sure to include the link for this resource specifically. But this was developed by Oregon State University through their eCampus. And the way to look at this is looking at the different levels of Bloom's from remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create, understanding where our assessments fall within those levels of Bloom's taxonomy, but then understanding, and as we build an understanding of what AI can and cannot do, this is trying to help identify what are the AI capabilities within each of these different levels, and then where you may fall within that. So it may be totally fine for AI to completely complete your assessment that you're measuring on understanding of something for a student. And if that's okay, that's okay. But students need to understand that that's okay, and then how they can appropriately use AI in your course that doesn't go beyond that expectation of academic integrity. So it's all about really communicating what those expectations are with your students. But using this chart or this tool as a way to self-reflect on your assessments inside your course and identifying, I have this, assessment I give at midterm that really I don't want them to use AI on. And based on this, I'm seeing that AI can completely do that entire assessment. So what would you need to do to rectify that, right? To mitigate the AI impact on that activity. And a lot of times what I ask my faculty to do is look at this chart, think of ideas, but if you want, come to an instructional designer, come to Rand, our assessment coordinator, and have a conversation about where I am right now, what AI can do, that's not okay with me, what are my options? And I know that's a very vulnerable conversation, I think, to have, but you find those colleagues that you can trust and have those discussions with and really lean on each other. I think this is a time where in which we identify that's going to take a village to fully support and adapt to this. So really embracing and leaning on those relationships you have with your colleagues in this time. Some of the resources that we as instructional design point to, and I'm sure your institution has something very similar. We go towards OSCR as kind of our set of research-based best practices in course design. And it's not just online or distance ed, it's any course that has an online presence could follow OSCR standards. Other institutions have QM, Quality Matters, or I think Chemeketa has like a flavor of QM and OSCR. It's called COI. So your institution probably has a set of adopted or supported best practices that you can, and I think in times like this where we have a lot of change, a lot of evolution going on, we're not sure how to adapt, go back to our foundational principles and guidelines and what do they tell us, and kind of go from there. So Oscar 45, it specifically talks about frequent and appropriate authentic methods of assessment. It's got research backed, so it kind of shows how this leads towards student success. But then at the bottom of that page also, it gives you a bunch of different ideas of how you can start to think about developing authentic assessment inside your course. But again, inside that standard, it calls out and says it comes down to one simple question: how do you know that learning has taken place? So it really comes to that. And if it's okay for AI to be a part of that equation, then that's totally fine. But if it's not, then your students really need to understand the ins and outs of what your expectations are. Was there any, Rand, did you have anything else for the Bloom's taxonomy page, or was that all me?
I mean, you did a great job of that. One of the things I wanted to say is that when Kevin came to me, he came to me with this chart when we started our first discussion about this, because you can't talk about assessment without touching on Bloom's. And I saw some of that going by in the how are we going to change our tools, which is this conversation about getting up into those upper levels and really looking at thinking and analyzing and all of that. And I do wonder from an assessment perspective what that will do to our course learning outcomes. One of the best things I get to do on my campus is write learning outcomes with faculty. And there's this assumption that we're stacking outcomes from the lower levels of Bloom's up to the upper levels of Bloom's as students move through the curriculum. But what happens when the intro level courses need to have learning outcomes that are upper level Bloom's, because that's what's being assessed, because we're addressing that higher level reasoning in order to circumvent the possibility that AI is doing the task. And then the other thing I wanted to say, Kevin, have you dropped the note-taking document in? Because I see folks dropping links into the chat, and I wasn't sure if we wanted to orient people also toward the fact that these links are available in the mutual note sharing document. And we also have a spot in our note sharing documents for you to share your favorite resources or websites or things that you might find useful when dealing with this. I notice in these sessions that a lot of the time the chat starts to fill up with really great resources, and sometimes they go by so fast that I don't get them all. So I want to encourage people to use that.
Yeah, I haven't dropped that link yet.
Okay.
Sharing screen, it'd be kind of awkward.
And I can do it now,
Yeah.
actually. There we go.
Okay, I'm going to move us on. So this was, oh, Brand, this is you.
This is me. This is so the first thing I did actually after seeing that chart that Kevin just showed was go to ChatGPT and ask it the question. At what levels of Bloom's taxonomy are you best equipped to perform tasks? Because I wanted to see what ChatGPT would tell on itself. What happens when you just ask it. One of my favorite things about playing around with that system or with the large language models is like it just generates an answer. It's not, presumably trying to fool you, though it is hallucinating in some cases, right? It doesn't know that. And so I can just ask it questions like, what can you do? And it will tell me. And so I thought it was very telling that what it said is, I'm good at these things. I'm good at these lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy. I can remember things, I can understand things, I can even apply things. And I have to say that a lot of us think of application as being something that's moving into the upper level, and that we really harness, I think, especially at community colleges with CTE programs, career tech and things like that, where we really talk about applying, like it's that the difference between, what was it Paul said in the last session, the difference between I have it in my notes here because I really appreciated it. I can't find it. Demonstrate the difference between information and knowledge. And Kevin, you talked about, now they don't just have access to information, they have access to knowledge, but they have access to potential knowledge, some of which isn't accurate anymore. So now I feel like we're talking about the difference between information, between information, knowledge, and the wisdom to tell the difference. And really being able to evaluate that. And so understanding that it can remember that they can easily go and say, what is this thing? Here's a definition. What word is it? Right? Those traditional quizzes that are just which of the following is the best definition of are kind of going out the window for us. And we're orienting much more toward questions that are at the very least applying, because applying takes more time, and at least the student has to think through the right way to process that to answer the question. Do we go to the next one? Because the next one is flowing from here. And so then, it says that I'm more limited at these upper levels, analyzing, evaluating, and creating, or perhaps synthesis if you prefer. And so when I hear faculty talking about how to circumvent AI in assessing their students, this is it. I hear a lot about, well, I need to get them to those upper levels, but that alters what we think of as learning outcomes in our classroom. And so let's see. I wanted to get to that. I just saw something go by here. Move up the taxonomy under the assumption, yes, and that ties back in to that equity piece that we saw in that, and sort of what I said during my introduction there, where I'm talking about, well, now if I'm driving my curriculum, driving my course design into AI and how to deal with it, who am I leaving behind? And so there's this piece of this that says, sure, we can circumvent this or we can harness it, but we're still leaving someone out if we're not orienting our class toward teaching them how to use it. So now not only do I need to teach psychology, but I need to teach how to use AI to study psychology, so that all students start off in the same place. And what happens when some folks have paid versions and some people do not? And where is the institutional investment in providing access to a tool for students like this? So, and in talking about this for students and how we deal with it in our classrooms, I turned it back on myself a little bit. And I thought, okay, well, then what are the parts of my job? What are the things that I do that exist in the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy, where I can leverage this and harness this and give myself more time for those things that it can't do? And so I encourage people to think about that too, and talk about that a little bit in their breakout groups, assuming we're going to get there here any minute now. Can you use it for writing outcomes? I have recently worked on some curriculum mapping using AI and tried to harness this to map curriculum, not because I don't think that professionals need to look at those maps and confirm that they're correct, but because there's a barrier in terms of time spent doing that job for faculty who are busy doing a lot of things. And if we can take some of that away from them, provide an opportunity to confirm maps rather than create maps, then perhaps we have more time to spend talking about teaching and learning.
Yeah, let's go. Maybe the last couple of slides are pretty quick because we're getting long on time. We want to make sure we have time for breakout groups. So how can we make cheating with AI harder through the structure of our assignments? So how do we take Bloom's and kind of dig a little bit deeper in applying this? Rand, do you want to speak to the bullet points here real quick?
Yeah, sure. This is also a list that I generated from ChatGPT. I asked it how I could fool it, or how can I overcome as a teacher? How could I design assessment tools that would be difficult to complete using a large language model or generative AI? And it produced a great list. And it's the kind of list that we've been hearing people talk about in these kinds of spaces for the last 6 months to a year. And so I encourage you to look at that, and I encourage you to see that it really does overlap with some of those word clouds that we saw moments ago. And the issue is that it also represents, I think, work for teachers, right? Oh, well, that's more time. I have to spend more time grading. I have to spend more time doing that authentic feedback that we see talked about. And so that's why I want to encourage the use of AI to lighten what load can be lightened in your life, if that works for you. In order to provide space for this. And so just look at this and think about how that impacts you, and think about how some of that is a bigger challenge for you in the distance learning arena. Right? The group here is a different audience than might be in in a general space, because we're talking about being less likely to have in-class assessments and in-class discussions.
Yeah.
And then, the conversation really is tilting into this, what is academic integrity? As I said, I think the conversation is often around academic dishonesty. How do we catch them cheating if they're cheating, rather than how do we move this discussion into how do we encourage integrity in our classrooms? This is the promotion versus the prevention focus approach. We need to promote academic integrity. We need to promote learning, and talk to them about the purpose of learning and how it will influence them and affect them in their job and in their career, and the good things they'll get by doing this, what we would call right, or at least ethically and appropriately, rather than threatening them with the negative consequences that honestly at 2 o'clock in the morning, the night before it's due, seem like a reasonable wager.
Yeah, and I think it really comes, a lot of this really speaks to me in a need for each institution to build, and if you don't already have this in development, build a culture of academic integrity or a culture of integrity. And what does that mean? Not just from our students, but from us as professionals as well. How do we model and ethical behavior when we use AI within our courses or within our communications and collaborations with each other? And our students will see that. And so however we use it and how we model it will be an example for them moving forward. But then having very open discussions with your students. And it's not just on day one when I go over my syllabus. It's throughout the term. And integrity is a discussion you continuously have with your students as you progress and as they continue through your courses. So I don't want to spend too much time on here, but I think that's something that's really important to me, is identifying that it's a culture. It's a cultural shift, I think. And right now, it's highlighted and even more critical need. Okay, I think we're there. So we went a little bit long on time, but I think that's okay. We are going to open up breakout groups here in a second. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing screen so I can get some links in there. But what we'll do is about 10 to 15 minutes of breakout groups, about 4 to 5 people per group. And we have questions that are the same questions we started off with that everyone kind of participated in on that collaborative document. We just want you to get into your groups and have smaller discussions around that. So I think with that, let's go ahead and do we have the breakouts created, Greg? Are we good there?
Yeah, Kevin, so I have created actually 8 groups based on different disciplines. So everyone is free to choose what area they'd like to go to. So I've got math, physical science, social science, English writing, business, healthcare, computing, engineering, and arts and humanities. Go to your affinity group or pick a different group. Up to you. So I'm going to open up the rooms now.
And I think probably about 12:51 or 2, we'll have everyone come back and do a really quick kind of large group share out from there.
Great. So we'll see you in a bit.
And I will stop recording.